but energy medicine. So, as a little bit of review, and then we're going to go into a practical application, and then we can do some Q&A. I'm not going to go that deep. I didn't have a chance to create too many slides today, but cover a couple different things. But all energy comes from the sun. A very small proportion of energy that doesn't come from the sun. And so we'll just slide this up here. There's just one main source of energy, equals mc squared, that's fusion. But we don't get too much of the heat from fusion. We only get the light. Light is massless, can travel through, Andrew, the ether or the vacuum or whatever we want to say space is all about. So we just get energy through frequency. And the greater the frequency, the greater the energy a single photon contains. That's the key thing. It's like there is more energy from the sun hitting our planet in the near infrared than any other part of the electromagnetic spectrum. But the near infrared is not the strongest of all the frequencies. It's a relatively low energy frequency. So we'll slide this one up here and talk about that. So the electromagnetic spectrum from gamma to radio, and then this little teeny segment of energy called visible, which is what we focus on because we can see it. Okay, but animals can see a different range than we can see. So it's kind of a subjective thing, visible from human, but these are human-made terms, doesn't really matter. Across this continuum, it's just waves, each of which pack more of a punch than another one. And maybe I'll briefly go down, because we have time, what each of these different types of energies do and how they can affect us. Just roughly, because we talk about an infrared sauna, near infrared sauna, far infrared sauna, microwaves. What do these all do? And I know I've gone over this in the past, but the gamma rays and X-rays, they literally are penetrating things. They're extremely small, so the likelihood they're going to interact is low. But if they do hit a nucleus, for example, of an atom, then they can cause major damage by converting a neutron into a charged particle, or blasting a neutron out of the nucleus, any number of different things. But fortunately, matter is 99.9% empty space. We don't really think of it that way, but the nucleus is a teeny solid object in the middle of this vast sphere of floating electrons. So what was it? Not Heisenberg. I forget how to review my physics. But what they showed in that experiment is you could send particles at a sheet of gold, and most of them would go straight through. Very few would deflect. Okay, and then they figured out from that experiment that matter is mostly void space. It's electron cloud, and the nucleus is, I don't know, 1/1000th. It's been a while since I've studied such things, but much smaller compared to the overall size of the atom. So a lot of these high energy particles pass right through, and we're being exposed to them all day long. I took a course in nuclear physics at Worcester Polytech, and we're constantly being bombarded by these things that are measured in REMS and RAD. So we've adapted. It's not like you go for a massive X-ray and you have or chemo, or not chemo, but radiation from cancer, and it destroys a lot of your tissue. A lot of these things are coming through. They may interact a little bit, cause a little bit of harm. But guess what? We've been under the sun for eons, and we've developed repair mechanisms for this when it's happening at relatively insignificant levels. Then ultraviolet. Ultraviolet is the first of the pieces of the electromagnetic spectrum that interact more substantially with our human physiology. And what you can't see the UV, the closest we can see is the blue light in the visible spectrum, but the UV we don't see at all. And we can't even feel it because it does not elicit any kind of a noticeable physical effect on our body. What it does do is promotes an electron from a ground state. Everything's kind of seeking its most fundamental state. So, for example, water would be the ground state of hydrogen and oxygen. Okay, very stable. Extremely difficult to get water to go back to hydrogen and oxygen, but really easy to get hydrogen and oxygen to go to water. So that would be the ground state. Now, in chemistry and in the physics of chemistry, popping an electron up from the ground state to an excited state is actually not that hard. It's a heck of a lot easier than breaking up water into its fundamental components, hydrogen and oxygen. But the interesting thing is that electron, while it resides in an excited state, can be made available to do something, like donate that electron to heal something or to affect another chemical reaction, things like that. Visible, very similar in mode of action to the ultraviolet light, but lower energy. So it interacts with sort of what I'd call less stable molecules. So whereas the UV can interact with fairly stable things, the visible light is going to react with things that have lower, what I call lower bands, more easily is accessible. So it's the differentiation between the ground state and the excited state that really determines the energy that the light imparts on the molecule. So in the case of UV, it's like carrying water way uphill, whereas invisible, so that electron that's now available is way uphill. It can do a lot of hard, dirty work, whereas the visible light, the gap between the ground state and the excited state is a lot lower, so that electron has a lot less energy to do work. Therefore, in the case of UV, it can do beneficial work, but it can also do harm. That's why UV would be more harmful than visible light. So particles, kind of like particles that can only interact with little teeny particles like the nucleus. Now we have things that can interact with a lot of different molecules. Now we have things that visible interacts with things that are actually we see that have expressed as a color. Then the infrared, we don't see that. But see, temperature is just the average kinetic energy or motion of particles. And all infrared light does, whether it's near infrared or far infrared, is cause chemical bonds to vibrate back and forth. So if this is, say, water, hydrogen and oxygen, it causes the bonds to vibrate. The electrons don't go anywhere. It just causes motion in the molecule. And then the far infrared will be a little lower energy, and it'll cause the motion in weaker bonds that are, but still, in both cases, it stimulates basically a heating effect. And that's what I love about the infrared saunas and the infrared light is most of the time we think about heat and temperature. You go outside, it's cold out. Okay, that's conduction. Your skin's warm and the air is cold. And there's a basic principle in science called the Chartier's principle, where everything tries to become normal or average. So I think the best example is if I put a little drop of essential oil in the corner of my room, and I walk away and I come back in a few hours, that scent, that fragrance, those molecules that create that fragrance will be evenly distributed throughout the entire room. Temperature is the same thing. You've got cold temperatures where molecules are moving very slowly, and warm temperature on my skin, and it tries to seek an average. So that's conduction, where on the surface, my skin will cool down in exchange for the warmth of my skin for the molecules in the air to create this average. But in infrared, very different. It is not warming by conduction, it's warming by physically or chemically causing a motion in the molecule itself by the absorption of light, not by the transfer of heat from one molecule to the other. So the beautiful thing about the infrared is it can penetrate deeply and warm you up from inside. Maybe an image you don't want is that of a microwave oven, which does something similar. And, we all know that you can superheat your food and, but it's heated from within, not necessarily from the surface, whereas your convection oven is heating from the surface in, whereas the microwave is heating from the inside out. So I'm sure we could design a infrared oven that would work under the same principle, but it's basically warming you from the inside or across not just from the surface, let's put it that way. So microwaves simply cause a bond to rotate. And rotation, we think of it, quantum chemistry, what the heck is that all about? But no, these are physical things. And we literally cause those bonds to rotate, and it generates friction and heat. And then radio waves, it's not really interacting at a molecular level, so it's not affecting atoms and molecules so much. So anyway, let's go to the next. So we have what are called photoreceptors. And all a photoreceptor does is takes advantage of the energy of the wavelength of light, E equals h nu, and converts it through a chemical process. So for example, in the rods and cones of the photoreceptors of the eye, it's converting the light into an electrical signal. So it's very simple. The light hits something, it's visible light. This is mainly what we see. The electron goes to the excited state, and where normally it would just relax back down to the ground state, this photoreceptor system grabs that electron and sends it as a signal to the brain. So that's that. What is color? Well, when you see something that's any color, that means it's absorbing light. But what we see is the reflection of light. So, a black substance absorbs all visible wavelengths. So we see the absence of color because all the light's been absorbed, whereas a white substance reflects all visible. Very important to use the word visible because we can't see the UV or the near infrared. So all bets are off in terms of what it's doing in terms of interacting with those lights, because we have crummy detectors for that called our eyes. But in this case, here's the sun giving red and blue. They're absorbed, but the green light reflects off. So chromophores are molecules of a given material that absorb particular wavelengths of visible light. But in my opinion, we could use the word chromophore for any type of light. It doesn't have to be just visible light. But hopefully you understand from this little discussion here and the discussion about what visible UV and infrared light does is essentially any molecule could be considered to have a chromo or a light chromophore on it, because pretty much every molecule will absorb infrared light and vibrate. Any molecule will absorb microwave energy or light and rotate. And many substances are colored, not all colored. So a lot of things will absorb visible light. So I don't think the chromophore is really exclusive to the concept of just visible light. Once again, visible light is somewhat of a human-made term for a range of light that our retinal chromophores can detect. So the next thing we talked about is, see, energy drives reactions. Energy is, light is work. Energy is work, or the potential for work. We call it the little packet of light equals h nu is the potential to do work. It may not hit a molecule, or it may hit a molecule and the electron goes up, but then it relaxes right back down. No real work has happened. But in a lot of cases, work can happen if we bring things together in the right configuration. So the two different reactions, endothermic reaction that have a net sucking effect on energy. We have to put energy into the system. And then an exothermic reaction where we get energy out of the system. But all reactions need a push. All reactions need a push. So I'm getting to a crescendo here in a moment. But they all need a push. So in this case, energy is absorbed. How do we compensate for energy being absorbed? Put more energy into the system. Light, work, food, whatever it takes. But the most fundamental is, of course, light. That's where it all starts. So we have activation barriers. And so what we have here, what makes reactions go faster? Okay. So if you have a large activation barrier, in other words, you have some products like gasoline and oxygen, have plenty of energy packed in them if we can extract it. But we have this activation barrier. And once we overcome that, we produce fire, and the products, carbon dioxide and water, are much more stable than the reactants. Gasoline, none of us would consider really particularly stable. We try to keep sparks and flames away from it because it's reactive, whereas the CO2 in water is not. But if we either add a spark or temperature will significantly get more reactants to go up and over the curve and hop down to the product side. And certainly in the case of a diesel engine, for example, there's no spark. It's just temperature and pressure that drives that reaction. So here they are. Here's your diesel fuel, tons of energy doing nothing, and we apply heat and pressure, and voila, our diesel engine runs as well. What makes reactions go faster? Catalysts. So anything we can do to lower this activation barrier. So for example, bring the molecules into a better orientation for them to exchange their electrons. That'll make it go faster. So configuration is very important. We've done nothing to change the ultimate energetics of the reactants to the products, but we've done something to manipulate it. It's almost like sawing a piece of wood. If we put it in a vise, it's a lot easier to saw than having it flopping around, and your saw gets caught, and it becomes a very difficult thing to be. So in this case, the vise would be your catalyst to make that reaction, sawing the wooden tube work a lot faster. And then particle size. If we can get, we're not talking about molecules, but we're talking about larger structures, particle size matters. So for example, a grain silo fire, chunks of corn aren't going to ignite, but little fine dusts from the corn, high surface area, much more likely to get that carbohydrate to react with oxygen and produce CO2 and water. So particle size matters. So the practical thing I have to say, and then we're going to just do some Q&A. The number one thing I see is people don't digest well. And a lot of them don't know it. They don't really have obvious symptoms of poor digestion. Oftentimes the labs will reveal more than their own symptoms, but any kind of gut dysbiosis is a bad thing because you're malabsorbing. You are what you absorb. And I like this one better. One cannot think well, love well, sleep well, if one is not dined well. And I love the way they say it, dined well. It makes me want to go out to a fancy restaurant tonight and get some petit de foie gras or something. Which is petit de foie gras is what? Goose something or other. So always in favor of consuming a dead goose. That's another whole story. So in my humble opinion, number one health issue is digestion. How do we speed up digestion? So three things: catalysts, your microbiome, digestive enzymes, bile acids, stomach acid, and eating pre-digested foods like fermented foods. Okay, those might be considered to some extent catalysts, because with a pre-digested food, the activation barrier to convert it to basic fundamental absorbable and usable building blocks, it's easier to get there. Temperature, underappreciated. How many people dieting will drink a large glass of water to fill their stomach up so that they eat less? Okay, but what they've done is they've cooled down their gut, and there's a very good chance that they're not digesting as well. They've diluted their acid, they've cooled down the temperature in their gut, and temperature matters when it comes to reactions. That's why this whole discussion on activation barrier. Okay, so like, let's just say this is where you are in digestion. You put in cold water, now the digestion is going to look like this. A lot less of your food is going to be converted to bioabsorbable constituents that you can use either feed your cells or repair your cells. So it's a very important concept. Particle size, grit and chewing. I did a whole talk on grit. Anybody here hear my talk on grit? I don't know if you've overlapped on that. This audience has, but you know, every other animal other than humans does not clean their food copiously, and they probably get grit. I've been notorious for eating the seeds of my grapefruit, and I don't eat peanuts anymore, but there was a time where I didn't bother shelling them. And the shell would literally be grit to help other things digest, I believe, because every other animal responds well to grit. My story about the chicken stopped laying eggs, and my daughter said, give them some grit, and they start laying eggs again. Why? Because now they have enough energy and nutrients from their food to support the growth of an egg along with their own survival. So here are my digestion tips. And they all kind of relate back to energy, sort of, not all of them. And I say, you know, so this gut protocol that we do, if I'm recommending this, avoid raw foods as they are hardest to absorb. Okay, but now we can talk about it in more energy terms. What does that mean? What it means is the activation to absorb nutrients out of a raw food is going to be higher than the activation energy required to get nutrients out of a food that's partially digested. And this delta here, between here and there, would be the degree to which that food is already partially digested. So there are two things that help you digest a food before, several things, but we'll call it three things before you know, compared to a raw food. Okay, number one would be fermenting, number two would be cooking, and then number three is chewing. But all animals chew, well, to some degree. Nikki, do you chew? Not really. She just swallows, so I guess that goes out the window. But chewing is a very important part of lowering this activation barrier. So it's a lot easier for that process to move forward. The second thing I say is consume more fermented foods. So it's the same. You know, so the first thing I said is cook. Okay, cook lowers the activation. Fermenting lowers the activation. I think it's important to understand that there are two types of fermented foods, those with and without live cultures. But even the ones without live cultures, assuming they've had live cultures to start with, the live culture has broken that food down to some extent. So even if it's without the live culture, it's still going to be easier to digest. And most importantly, not easier, quicker, same thing, to digest than its unfermented counterpart. Fermented foods are best if they contain live cultures. However, any fermented food is easier to digest compared to its counterpart. Consume a warm beverage with your meal. Okay, there's a lot of cultures out there that start with a tea or a warm soup. And I think it's also a good idea to finish with, bone broth or a warm soup. I went to an Asian market recently. I've been making my own miso and miso soup, and really enjoying that as a meal. But having something really warm, and the reason is, as this activation barrier comes down, say with fermented food and cooked food, that usually we think about the energy required to get up and over this hump as being temperature and chemistry. It's more to that in nutrition, but just raising the temperature of your gut a couple degrees will have a profound effect on your ability to digest. I don't have good proof for that, other than the fact that we know the rule of thumb is if we increase temperature, reactions go faster. And all you're doing when you're breaking down food is you're affecting chemical reactions to break bonds. It's that straightforward. So consume a warm beverage. Now, this is a quote from someone else. Warm temperatures will actually widen blood vessels in the digestive system, which increases blood flow. Yeah, that's a thing. No question about it. That's a thing. But I think that's only part of the thing. The other part of the thing is you will literally make everything happen faster. You only have a few hours to really get things out of the gut into the stage of your digestion where you're absorbing. So it's really important to do everything we can now, especially, we have these Franken foods. Some of them are really easy to absorb, the ones with fructose, but some of them are probably hard to break down. And the fact that we don't break them down well might explain a lot of our food allergies that we have. So just having something warm before, during, and with a meal makes a lot of sense. And then these are less to do about energy, but in some ways they have everything to do with energy. Eat soups and bone broth, they soothe the gut and provide micronutrients. So in other words, bone broth, that's a pre-digestion. Trying to extract some magnesium out of kale, not an easy task if your digestive system's working poorly, but getting micronutrients out of bone broth, it's already liquefied, so it's a very simple task. I like people to take a fulvic humic mineral. Then licorice is something that's soothing to the gut. Even low levels of H. pylori infection decrease stomach acid. So why is stomach acid important? Goes right back to here, particularly in breaking down proteins. You need strong acid to break the so-called amide bonds that link proteins, amino acids together to create proteins. So when you have H. pylori present, your ability to break things down goes from here to here. And if you go up and you have to push everything over this curve, it's like carrying water uphill. Here you're going over a molehill, here you're going up, a steep driveway. So it's a big difference. So H. pylori would be considered an anti-catalyst in that respect. And that's it. That's all I have for you folks today in terms of energy medicine. But I just thought it'd be interesting to link the concepts in energy medicine to something as basic as digestion, and hopefully it becomes more memorable in that context. It's all about, we all have to get things over a hump. Every reaction needs a push, and digestions, it's just a big reaction vessel. Okay, so if we can lower that activation barrier, we can digest better. And if you can dine better, you can do all kinds of things better. You can love better. It's perfect. What could be better than that? Anybody have any questions? Let's see, we have just a couple chats out there. Denny, what kind of licorice are you talking about? I tend to eat a pound or two of Twizzlers, Denny. Okay, just kidding. So I literally go on bulk apothecary and I get a licorice root extract. I forget the exact name of the compound, but I have it up here. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. Anybody who wants to, I always had tongue twisters learning foreign language. But yeah, I literally look, but there are a number of things that can soothe the gut, aloe vera, but licorice is an ancient cure for stomach upset and irritable bowel and things of that nature. So I just go on eBay and or bulkapothecary.com, and that's how I found it.
This is deglycerized licorice root.
Deglycerized, yes.
Because regular licorice root is for increasing cortisol levels.
Progress. So I wonder if that's what I'm advertising.
Yeah. If it's regular licorice root, yeah, that's one of the things I use in adrenal dysfunction. But you have to be careful in anybody who has high blood pressure because it can markedly increase blood pressure. So
Carol and I have talked to a couple people recently that are medicine specialists, and yeah, a lot of the things I'm talking about, what I like about this is when the Ayurvedic folks are saying the same thing, whether they understand the foundational mechanism or not, I don't care about that, but there's nothing wrong with seeing cause and effect observations and then applying that to the real world and to health. So cold foods inhibit digestive fire. Yeah, exactly what's going on. It's just raising the activation. What about using a heating pad to warm the abdomen? Thank you, Judy. So I have a couple people trying my, that very intense halogen, 500-watt halogen lamp. If you have a digestive warm your belly with it. And the beautiful thing about that is, once again, hope everybody understands the difference between radiant heat and energy that can penetrate and elicit a heating effect on a molecular level deep down inside. And that's what the halogen light, because you can feel that heat. I do an experiment. Put the halogen light about this far away from you and put your hand between it. The air is still cool, okay? But the surface that's being hit and below the surface is extremely warm. So it has nothing to do with just conduction of temperature across the space. It's literally warming up the tissue. So I think using something infrared. I look at myself as being some of my kids might have said I was cold-hearted at one point, just demanding. But look at what the cold-blooded animals do. They don't have the 98.6 circulating, so they go out and bask in the sun to digest. But today, with the foods we're eating and the sorry state of our digestive system, we're probably a heck of a lot more like cold-blooded animals when it comes to digestion. So I think heating would be an extremely interesting thing to do to facilitate digestion. So Judy, I love your idea about a heating pad, but I think the infrared, because it penetrates more quickly and more deeply, more quickly, would be a good thing to do. So, but just going out in the sunshine, pretty tough to do it right now with in most of the country because of the cold temperatures, but going out and getting some sunshine. And the Mexican siesta, we haven't really talked about this aspect of it, but even if you're not in direct sunlight, some level of infrared light reflects off trees and other natural surfaces. So you will be getting some exposure to infrared light, and infrared light will penetrate a lot of clothing and warm you up a little bit. But I think there's a better way you can do that if you're really having digestive issues. And I have a few people that have profound digestive issues that are trying this. I haven't really heard back from them yet. Either no news is good news, or it's just not something that just feels natural and comfortable. I normally now am having lunch under my halogen lamps. So I'm accidentally doing that, even though I'm not consciously thinking about. Will there be posted on? I am going to try the next couple of days. That's kind of a quiet week to get, Dr. Harshfield's lecture up, a bunch of other things I want to put out there, but including this. BioPure's B have licorice root tincture on sale. Delicious. Yeah, I'm liking it. And then we have the deglycerized. Thank you, Michael. Let's see. Dr. Stark said, I went out walking this morning along the Charles. It was during morning, but it was cold outside. So I was bundled up. The sun's rays penetrate my clothing, and is there much benefit from the sun? I think to some degree. The way to know, Martha, I'm going to do a more detailed talk on the absorption pattern of substances, not in the visible, but particularly in the infrared, and just to show the diversity of sort of the broadness of the infrared spectrum, near and far, and how different substances absorb. But it's fairly there's a lot more specificity in terms of what molecules absorb what light in the infrared than the visible. The visible peaks tend to be very broad, so they absorb across a wide range of frequencies, whereas the infrared, there's much more specificity. My point is, there's a good chance that some of that infrared can be leaking its way through. That's what I'm told. But I mean, there's going to be so many other benefits. The biggest benefit going outside is microbiome. I know it's a little chilly up there and whatnot, but you go out to Castle Point, and the Atlantic is still splashing, and you get exposed to the microbiome. So there's almost no unanticipated benefits of going outside. Send out a pic of your halogen lamp rig set up. Joy, I will do that. I will do that on this newest energy medicine thing, just to show you what I do in terms of, like, in the context of how you can warm your gut while you're having lunch under the lights. What does a coated tongue and other geographic tongues say about digestion? Michael?
Well, I mean, it depends on what it's coated with. I mean, of course, this white Candida is kind of high on the list there. Geographic tongue generally is deficiency of various nutrients and so forth. So, yep.
What is geographic tongue?
Where it's, uneven. It could be, bumpy in some areas and smooth in other areas and so forth.
So another Ayurvedic interpretation is the buildup of toxins in the system. You think you're saying the same thing, Michael? Coated yellow,
Yeah.
Inflammation of some kind. White is sticky ama, AMA. Comment on PBM, where infrared light passes through the skull into the brain. So I'll get there eventually, Lowell, but the point is, light has the ability to reflect, not just absorb. And there have been good studies now. The work of Zimmerman that Roger Schwelt highlighted shows that light can ricochet down deep into the brain. So you can get infrared therapy way deep into the brain, even by shining light on your skull. I mean, I am doing eye therapy every morning by shining that halogen lamp very intently right on my face. And yeah, I do close my eyes, but not always. If I'm looking that way and the light's coming this way, I don't feel the need to close my eyelids. But all good comments. Anything else? Any general questions? Lowell, you had your hand up. Is there anything you want to ask?
Yeah, do you have any experience now with, as you know, I think I've been working with Dr. Marvin Berman and the photobiomodulation helmet along with neurofeedback. Do you have any other clients who are doing that, or do you have any experience with that?
Well, I think in general, this is a good thing, but I'm not sure exactly what the dose is. Are we being too cautious with some of these things? And then sunlight is not something that's a miracle cure. In the 1800s, we were out dramatically more than we were today, every day. So I think just like in everything chronic, Lowell, consistency makes a big difference. And I don't think light is, I think light is more of a, I don't want to say it's not a healing thing. It obviously is. Oh, transport of electrons and all that stuff are critical, but it's made more to keep us healthy than it is to treat disease.
What are you using it for?
Traumatic brain injury.
Video, so you can
Okay.
read this daily. So when I read this particular script, I actually met my soul member, like 6 or 7 members of my soul family within.
Okay.
Yeah, it's retrain, well, along with the neurofeedback.
Right. So yeah, Dr. Berman's, helmet is definitely by far the most, let's say, powerful out there with the 1,000+ LED lights and so forth versus the others out there on the market. But yes, I mean, in and of itself, it's not the sole therapy. Neither is neurofeedback. But neurofeedback is a piece of the puzzle as well. So, and it really depends. It really depends on the neurofeedback device that's being used and the operator. So very heavily dependent on their skill levels as well. Yeah. Okay.
I think after about 4 months using the helmet and the neurofeedback, particularly with the neurofeedback, I'm noticing that my brain is reacting much quicker.
Oh, good.
Not surprising, but what folks like Dr. Harshfield say, and what Dr. Carter obviously talks about this, and Dr. Dallas Hack that we work with sometimes, is we want to get rid of all the impediments as well.
All right.
Because once again, sunlight and that kind of response, particularly from the light perspective, is something we're supposed to be getting every day. So it's not going to be some type of miracle cure. The other question is about the harm of the UVC light, I guess, when your eyes are closed. Not really sure. Have to see how the eyelids filter. But to me, just being in nature, it seems to make sense that it's a relatively safe thing. I have a joke, I don't mind being a little wrinkly from the squinting. My daughter in June said, "Dude, where's my wild girl, the mechanic?" She goes, "Dude, where's your sunglasses?" I said, "I'm wearing them. They're called pupils." I kind of count on my eyes to create the appropriate filter to protect sensitive and delicate tissue. But who knows? But I know back in the day, people were plenty of time out in the bright sunshine, and they weren't using sunglasses and all that good stuff. And there's a misnomer about how long people lived. And I didn't hear about blindness as being a major problem. The mid-Victorians, who I talk about a lot in the book, was this group. It was this period of time from about 1850 to 1890 where the British, if you were studied well, they had good documentation in their medical archives. If you made it past the age of 6, you lived as long as British people did today, but with 1/10 of degenerative diseases. So I think we can get by without a lot of modern paraphernalia to so-called protect us, because with every level of protection is also a potential level of harm as we adapted to this light, and no one can say that this wavelength of light is damaging and this wave of light is beneficial. Overall, I think light is beneficial to our health. And Kofi, you asked about specific frequencies. We adapted under all frequencies. So can specific frequencies do specific work on specific molecules? A lot of specific there. And the answer is a decided yes. But who's to say that some other molecule that may not be turned on by that frequency just slightly outside of the range of that particular LED doesn't play some cofactor effect with a cascade of reactions that are involved in the overall process we're trying to achieve. So I don't have any problem with the infrared saunas from a heating perspective and all that, but if we're trying to carry out very specific activities that might be a little naive, I think the best way is with more broad spectrum light in general. Opinions on the little inexpensive nasal light clips. Is this something we should be doing? Well, all I know is that, Martha, you'll obviously get a kick out of this, but, Till Lindemann, the head of the Rammstein, would come on stage in certain venues with that red, infrared, white sort of mouth guard thing, and his mouth is all kinds of fluorescing and all kinds of stuff. I don't know anything about them, is my answer. But he didn't do it in Gillette, unfortunately. We were looking forward to the fluorescent mouth of Till. So Judy likes my idea of it eating in front of the lights. We'll try it. What I love about the lights is, I used to go out in the cold and you develop a chill, and you come back inside, and you might take a shower or run the tub or something like that to get that profound chill out. The halogen lights take it out like that, just instantly gone, because it's not just heating you on the surface. And that's what the sauna does too. It does not just heat you on the surface, it literally heats you internally as well. So the whole process of warming you up is that much quicker. So in the context of digestion, you can get, I would suspect you'd get pretty good penetration of warming to your digestive system, your stomach, your intestines, very with great facility using this kind of light. So hopefully that's useful, because once again, I don't think anybody has really great digestion. So working that is extremely important. And who knows, maybe it'll also help your microbiome expand too. So, you could get multiple benefits from it.
Is that any halogen lamp? Like just buy a random halogen bulb?
So that's a great question. So, Dr. Mercola had the gentleman who created the SaunaSpace sauna systems. And what they use are incandescent bulbs. The old fashioned, we're all moving towards LED, but it's the old fashioned light bulb. And what I like about the halogen light is it simulates solar spectrum very well, just like the incandescent bulbs do. But I haven't found many incandescent bulbs that are designed to sort of directly radiate at you. Whereas you go and get the halogen lamp, which is in this, rectangular fixture with reflective medium in it, and you can literally spill the light out in a very concentrated way, and they come with adjustable poles and all that, so you're just not finding that on the with incandescent bulbs. So it's a very easy way to set up a little staging of very intense near infrared producing, but visible light obviously producing as well, and a little UV, and then near infrared. It's very easy to set up a little staging that looks an awful lot like sunlight. So the answer is any halogen bulb is putting out the exact same set of frequencies, and they overlap with the sun tremendously, as does an incandescent bulb. And the reason why we don't want them in our houses is, you know, I used to have some halogen lamps, and it's like, I'm gonna smoke my insulation, you know, the paper on it, and catch a fire because it produces so much heat. And the heat is exactly what we want. It's the near infrared, warms us up. So any bulb that produces a lot, like I have an LED right here, nothing, cool as, you know, maybe 80 degrees, 85 degrees. But if I had the halogen lamp, they have a plate of glass and then the wire cage to keep you from burning yourself. Why? Because it's putting out so much infrared on a, and it's a lot easier to make a 500 watt halogen bulb than it is to make a 500 watt tungsten bulb. I don't know what the technology is, but you know, I remember going up to a camp in Maine where they had like these 20 watt bulbs, and we're paying rent, you know, to stay on Damascotta Lake. And they were neighbors of mine's grandparents, and they were like really chintzy people. So I remember I was like 12 years old. I went to the hardware store and bought a 300 watt incandescent bulb. And I was going to light up my area where I stayed. But, you know, it's not easy to find a 300 or 500 watt incandescent bulb. Whereas you go to Walmart, you can buy a pair of 500 watt halogen lights, which really simulate being on the beach in Cancun at 12, 18 inches from your body for almost nothing. The bulbs cost a buck, $1. So from a practical application standpoint, the halogen bulbs, number one, simulate the solar spectrum better than the incandescents. Not a big difference, but the incandescents have a little more infrared from what I can see. And they're just perfectly designed, not perfectly, but nicely designed to allow yourself to very inexpensively set up a nice little warming near infrared red light visible, you know, solar light station if you're not able to get outside because of the latitude you're at, the temperature, things of that nature.
And that's 18 inches is how far you should be from the lamp.
So what I try to do is, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to simulate, you know, 6 p.m. or 9 a.m. sunlight. I'm going to try to simulate midday sunlight near the equator. But I'm not going to sit around all day long out there. You know, I want to simulate that really strong portion. And so there's something artificial to that as well. So what I'm trying to do is literally within a half an hour, be close enough that it's uncomfortably warm, my core temperature goes up, and I start perspiring. Just like you would on the beach. That's what I'm trying to simulate.
What was the distance away from you again?
Well, you know, Lowell, it's between 12 and 18 inches. You know, I have two stands, both with two lights, so it's 2,000 watts, and I generally can't do 2,000 watts. I do 1,000, and you know, but my core temperature will go up, and where that light is hitting me, I'm rather hot. But the warming is general because you have a circulatory system.
But it's from the inside out?
Pretty much.
Or
I mean, you're gonna get heating everywhere. Sure, probably a lot of it's on the surface because the deeper it goes, the more absorption of the light, but it will penetrate. There's no question it will penetrate.
well, that's what
Can you
the
show us a picture of yours?
where they didn't heat.
Doris, I'll put a picture up this week when I publish this blog on energy medicine.
And that's once a day for 30 minutes?
That's what I'm doing. I get up, I get my little Java, I'll listen to a lecture, I'll read something. Sometimes I'm blasting my face, so I'll just be listening to something rather than reading. You know, I try to do as global as I can, but I'm not doing much from the kneecaps down. And you know, Robert, who's on this call, has figured out how he's going to put it inside his existing sauna. You know, he hired someone to, you know, figure out how to wire that up, and so he can have it inside his sauna as well. But I am just trying to get as much of my skin exposed to the light rather than the temperature. You know,
You
sauna-
could lie on a yoga mat and face the lamp.
that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm on top of a massage table, a narrow
Right.
massage table, and the stands are standing on either side of it. And they have telescoping poles to raise and lower. You can twist and pivot it. You can put one light on, you can put both lights on. So, you know, there's a lot of flexibility. So I just like every day I kind of wing it in terms of just, you know, trying to heat myself as globally as possible. I have my digital thermometer. And if I'm irradiating from the neck down, then I'll just measure my temperature, and I can usually get it up at least a degree or two. So in that case, it's kind of simulating what you're doing in terms of the kind of core temperature increase you might see in exercise. You know, I'm not trying to simulate a fever every day for sure. You know, I'm not trying to get to 103, something like that, but I'm trying to get the kind of elevation you might see in exercise. Yep. But I mean, being someone with not a lot of body fat and like being outside a lot. So like what right now I'm doing kind of a hot cold cycle. I'll go do this, and then we'll have a 1 mile loop, and I'll go out and pedal my mountain bike with my dog and with basically just a t-shirt, chill right off, and then I might come back in and give myself a little quick warm, because you warm up so quickly, and then go about my day. And then Martha asked the question, yeah, I shower every spring. So I'll be showering, you know, in a few months. So, but I tend not to. I tend just like to enjoy, because when you shower, you know, or bathe, you know, then you have the water on and evaporation. And I don't know if people are aware of the fact that water is an extremely unique liquid with a very high latent heat of fusion and evaporation. That means when it evaporates, to evaporate, it has already sucked out a lot of your heat. Okay, so I avoid getting wet after I do this, just because I like the residual warming effect of it. That's just a preference. I'm not sure there's anything, you know, deeply scientific or whatnot, but
I used to have an infrared heater that it didn't heat the air, but it heated the objects in the room. So that's what it was doing, huh? Putting out infrared light.
I'm basically being served up on the McDonald's counter, lol, you know,
Yeah.
under the heat lamps.
Yep.
But see, the thing is, the heat lamps are specifically trying to put out the infrared. They're trying to be very efficient for just the heating of food. But I think overall, when you look at what the effect of light has on our body, every wavelength makes a difference. It's very clear that, you know, I think vitamin D is probably the strongest anti-cancer drug, and that's produced from the UV. And so what I did with my halogen lights is I took off the plate glass, and, you know, glass filters out a lot of the UV. But then again, the bulb is encased in glass, so there's going to be some filtration of the UV. So if you're a little nervous about UV, you can leave that plate glass on, and the likelihood you're getting much UV from that halogen light is greatly diminished. But me, I want the full Monte. I want, you know, whatever the sun had to offer. So make sure if you get sunshine from within the house is not through a window. Yeah, exactly. What, you know, when windows are going to, you know, low E is designed to suck in to attenuate the infrared so you don't heat things up. And then the glass filters out the UV. So, I mean, we can adapt ourselves out of getting benefit from the sun if we stay inside for enough generations. There's a question, Linda.
I just put a little link in there too. I think the shop is called, it's a vest with an infrared battery powered pocket in the front. I would love your feedback on that, because I don't know if the batteries make a difference, but there's a link on there to, I think it's called, let's see, what is it? It's get-fit, FITT.com.
And explain it to me again. I missed the,
It's a vest, an insulated vest for going outdoors, but it's got an infrared pocket battery packet you can put in the chest part.
oh, very cool. I like it. Mhm. Now the question is it warming you internally or warming the components of the clothing that are designed to absorb it? But
Yeah, that's my question because it's pricey.
yeah, my attitude is someone worries about their electric bill. I'm not, I'm doing, I have all 4 lamps, but I'm only doing 2 of them, so it's 1,000 watts for a half hour. It's trivial. One of my friends did a calculation on the cost of it, and it's pennies, really, not that much. But my approach is to warm myself up before and after, unless
I
I'm
like Ed about, think about a generation ago in my mom's time, you were out all day.
Yeah.
But they ate whole foods. They slaughtered their hogs. So they were in the sun. Plus they had organic food because they raised it and, butchered it. And, so they had both great pieces.
Oh yeah, they had many great, and they worked hard, so they got a lot of physical activity. So those are the 3 key legs of the stool: the exercise, the sunlight, and the good food.
Mm-hmm.
That's why, I encourage everybody to read Paul Clayton's work. All the mid-Victorians, I don't mean to have the title perfectly memorized, but how the mid-Victorians lived, ate, and died, worked and died, or ate, worked and died, something of that nature. And he makes a very good case about the extent of chronic conditions in these people. They lived quite healthy, and they didn't live to 40. They lived to 80. They lived to 80. On average, a year longer than Brits live today. If we just filter out, 0 to 6 mortality was 42% in the 1840s, and then 0 to 10 mortality brought it over 50%. And if you include those statistics, birth statistics into mortality, it looked like we lived to 40 years old. But Ben Franklin 84, John Adams 90, George Washington bad teeth 67. There you go. That's all you need to know about longevity right there. Anyway, thanks very much. Looks like we're going to talk on this subject again. Okay, Doris, I will show you pictures of my rig Tuesday evening, but I'll also publish it, so it won't be exclusive to that. All right, folks, have a good Tuesday. Have a good Monday. And if I don't see you on Tuesday, very happy Thanksgiving. Get plenty of ornithine and arginine in your system. I will get 0 of it. I don't eat turkey. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.